Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Tonight, we are going to talk about etheric chords. And I'm going to approach the conversation by drawing from a personal experience, which is how I came to understand what an etheric chord even is. And then we'll move through some advice, the solution, which will dovetail into the advice, followed by some philosophy of those who are on a spiritual path. And then I'll finish it off with a message of hope. All right, so that's the outline for today's discussion. For those of you curious to understand etheric chords a little bit better and how they may be affecting you, story, solution, philosophy, and then hope. And so the story, quite simply, is despite my best efforts for many, many years, I have not been able to maintain good dental health. I've tried. And a few years ago, about 3 years ago, I needed to get another crown done, top right tooth. It's actually third from the back. And the dentist did the work. It was an excellent dentist. The work seemed to go just fine. But in the days that followed, I started having quite a bit of pain. And so I went back to the dentist and he did a small adjustment on the bite. And he said the nerve should settle down, not to worry about it. But it didn't. And in the months, actually the years that followed, I saw no fewer than a total of 5 dentists. And I had multiple adjustments done. And that bite, that tooth kept getting more and more painful. Because this event coincided with my spiritual journey, at the same time, I was starting to transition from a very practical, material existence where all of my solutions were found in the physical realm into more the spiritual space where more and more of my solutions were coming from above, so to speak. And along the lines of that transition, my meditations had grown very, very deep. Almost to the point where I could put out a question, go into my meditative state, quiet my mind so that I'm actually like pushing it aside, and I would wait and I would hear or feel answers. And so in the absence of a solution to this painful tooth, which every time I bit into something reminded me that I shouldn't chew on the right side because it was just too painful, I asked, what is going on? I prayed and I asked for guidance and solutions, help. And as luck would have it, in this moment, I heard a message. I received an answer, and it said etheric cord. And so naturally, my next question was, can you remove it? To which I heard back, yes, we can remove it. And I was overjoyed. And as maybe you would expect or not expect, I don't know, that request was successful. And although I'd spent 2 years in dental offices trying to fix this tooth to no avail, over the course of simply a 5-minute meditative session, the pain started to dissipate to the point where in the days that followed, it was as if it never was. It came all the way down from like a 10 to like a 1 or a 2 on the pain scale. It was no longer an issue. I could chew on either side of the mouth and not worry about it. First time in over 2 years. In a subsequent session, I was told it will come back. And at the time, I was just so excited that the pain was gone that I didn't even explore why they were telling me that it would come back. I simply went about my life as if everything was fine. About a month ago, the pain did come back. And this time, I was actually experiencing a very pervasive heaviness, which I know is not me. But I was experiencing a sensation of wanting to depart the physical body, as if I felt my incarnation was complete, or that I just didn't desire to be here anymore. And if you've ever been through a dark period or a depressed state, if you will, it's hard to see your way out of it. It's hard to gain perspective on what you're experiencing when those thoughts are so consistent and heavy. And fortunately, with enough personal development and self-awareness, after a few weeks, I knew that that energy was not mine. It was as if I was receiving the thoughts from another, and they were not pretty. And so at this point, I went and I sought more help. And a very profound explanation came through. And it explained to me that we live in a realm that has many weapons, some of which we have no knowing of, but have an influence on our thoughts and our feelings, and even the words that we speak at times, or the actions, the things that we do. That we are effectively susceptible to all sorts of influences that have gotten to a point in the modern era, currently, based on the events unfolding on the planet, where they are incredibly active right now. And it's shared that the etheric cords, which is the closest non-physical layer of your auric body to the human body, it literally sits right on top of your skin. That the etheric cord is a cord, an energetic cord that links into the last layer of the aura and can go ahead and aggravate at the cellular level parts of the body. It can also infuse into the consciousness and deliver messages, thoughts, or feelings. It can even change, as I said, the things that you say. And so this time I started to inquire, so where is it coming from? How do I get rid of it? How do I protect myself? And once again, a few years ago, this would have been an act of madness. I never would have bought into any of this stuff. And yet, as it was unfolding, based on what I had experienced with the pain, it all made perfect sense to me. And the answers that came through were, the cords are primarily, in this case, primarily being delivered through the screens. That there are certain images that are being broadcast in certain venues or certain platforms that are actively delivering these cords into the human body, the auric body. And I asked, can you identify which platforms? And the answer was no. Actually, it was almost like a flip book. All the images that I'd been looking at start to flash away. And they weren't able to identify exactly which images they were. But the explanation or the advice was that you can tell. If you're very much in tune, you can start to tell when your energy changes based on a platform or a news network that you may be observing. And so I came to realize, unfortunately, this platform itself, this is the great irony, the platform that I'm delivering you this message to always seems to get me. And so I stopped watching content here. But also a lot of the corporate media was not all of it. Some of it was fine. Some of it was really affecting me. And so I decided in that state to just get rid of it all. It's just not that important to me. And I feel so much better since. And by the way, after I asked for clearing, my mood lifted right away. That depressed state evaporated in a hurry. And the pain in this tooth, which had just resurfaced within a day or two, it went right away as well. I just came back from dinner. It didn't bother me at all. And so that actually is the continuation of this discussion, is into the advice piece. And that is quite simply that there are certain platforms that if you want to avoid these etheric cords, you need to avoid these platforms. Alternatively, as in my case, if you can go into a meditative state, or if you feel that you're able to connect with some form of angelic being, you can ask for these cords to be cut and any attachments to be removed on both ends and sent to the light. Okay, so in the event that I do desire to go onto YouTube, for example, and watch a video afterwards, I go into my meditation. That's simply the request I make. In my case, I called to the Archangel Michael, and I asked that he cut all cords that remove attachments, send it to the light, and reverse any of the effects of these vibrational weapons. Okay, and so that's my ritual. I'm happier not checking these platforms. I also have a ton more time in my day, and I don't engage in political discussions the way I used to, and that's actually better as well. It's almost all across the board. I feel like it's a benefit for me. But the primary benefit is that I'm pain-free, and my mood, my thoughts and my feelings have really opened back up. They're my own again, and I can tell the difference profoundly. Okay, and so that's the advice. Either begin to avoid these platforms, or call for help after you're on the platforms. And actually, what I would say, if you really want to test this out, set aside 3 days. So maybe keep a journal and write exactly how you feel right now doing your usual routine. And then go ahead and set aside 3 days of your life. 3 days. where you wake up in the morning and you sit quietly and you set an intention. I'm going to call to the Archangel Michael and ask for protection. I'm going to ask for all cords to be removed. And then you go ahead and you do it. You use the same language that I just shared, for example, or whatever feels right for you. And then you spend the next 3 days. You do that in the morning and the evening, just to make sure that you're clear. But you avoid all images. It's coming through images. There's no problem reading the news, for example. It's the images. There's no problem listening to videos, perhaps on this platform. It's some of the advertisements and some of the images that are streaming through that are carrying an energetic link that's allowing these cords to be delivered. Okay, so now you have the story, great suffering, great triumph, and then you have a bit of the advice, if you will. Right, that's my solution that may be appropriate for you as well. Feel into it. I don't know how many people watching this will actively connect with this sort of content, but if it feels at all right to you, go ahead and give yourself 3 days. Doesn't even have to be media free, image free 3 days, but where you're actively bookending your morning and your evening by removing those cords and attachments, making that request. The next piece that I figure is probably worth talking about, because this has been running through my mind extensively now over these last few months as this has been unfolding, is the philosophy of the journey, the spiritual philosophy. And it's a little bit trickier because everybody's on their own journey. But I can tell you that if this were a spectrum, if on one end of the spectrum was the practical world in which we live, where everything is tangible, and on the other end of the spectrum is the metaphysical or the spiritual, where the most profound parts of our existence we can't detect with our 5 senses. I would tell you that over the course of this tooth issue, which is now dating back 3.5 years, I went and shifted from firmly in the practical realm to very far over into the spiritual space. And it doesn't mean that I don't go to the dentist. And it certainly doesn't mean that I'm against medicine per se. It simply means that my faith-based approach is that I rely on nature's principles, that I call for help regularly, and that I feel into everything before I participate in it. So if something doesn't feel right, I know that it's my guiding system telling me, even if my human mind can't figure it out, I know that that feeling is the guidance, right? And if something excites me, if it feels really right, and I know it's of a high vibrational nature, I almost know certainly that it's an encouragement to go down that path, right? So instead of relying on my human mind to constantly analyze and decipher all that is happening in such a conflicted and challenging and confusing era, this era is wrought with peril. And I'm not saying that past eras weren't, but this era in particular, the ascension itself, is particularly challenging. It is of unusual value to be able to quiet the human mind and to tap into your feelings or your sensing or your knowing or your intuition or your guidance, whatever you want to use to describe it, and being able to trust that system more profoundly. Right? And that's what's been working for me now consistently over the last few years. And I tell you, as people come into my space, I feel into their vibration as well. And if they don't feel right, I let them float out of my space, right? As I turn on any type of content from any venue, I feel into the vibration, right? And if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't matter what is being shared there. I don't engage it. The moment you're able to properly step into this intuitive self, right, is the moment that you're liberated from a lot of the worry in the physical realm. And that strengthens the connection that continues to allow you to be pulled forward. Right? You're no longer human doers. It's time that we all become human beings. And that beingness, that state of being, is not about measuring how much you can achieve any longer. It's allowing the alignment to occur so that you can fall into the perfect intention for the incarnation, whatever that may look like. Right? The focus is on your vibration. The focus is on being the best version of yourself. The focus for most people is simply to be a good person. And if you're not sure if you're a good person, ask the people closest to you in an act of humility. Ask the people closest or the people that aren't as close. Say, hey, do you think I'm a good person? Was I a good person today? Was I a good person this week? Am I a good person? Ask the people that maybe are critical of you. Do you feel I'm a good person? And then regardless of what comes back, just thank them for taking the time to share. If you feel the need to defend yourself, or if you're contradictory to what it is that comes back, right? You're going the wrong way. Because even if what they're sharing is nothing more than a projection of their own problems and challenges, if you're of high vibration, you can be at peace with all that is. And this is the state of beingness that I realized was so profound as part of my incarnation journey. And I'm not there all the time. I admit to it. But I would also share that at least half of my days now are being spent in joy. And it feels wonderful to be at peace with all that is. The final part of this message is a message of hope. And I will share very strongly, I believe, that these platforms that we've come to love and to use for so many years that now are full of propaganda and unfortunately dealing with tremendous amounts of censorship and, of course, etheric cords and other vibrational weapons, that all of that is going to come to pass. Okay? As part of the evolution of the planet moving into a high vibrational state, we will once again take back the platforms and use them for the joy that they offer. Some of these platforms are of particular low vibration and they're intended to divide society or to distort the human mind, to impair the consciousness, oftentimes to reduce the attention span and make it harder to stay present and to remain connected to each other. Those platforms we won't miss. But the platforms that are particularly valuable, useful, that have been around for a while but have been commandeered by darkness, they'll come back and we'll be able to use them once again for the things that we enjoy most. Okay? So that's the discussion, guys. I hope it's of value as always. I wish you love and light. And if what I've shared tonight offers you any value, that's something that's worthy of posting in the comments. And I do, by the way, people ask me. So I read all the comments. And I have a whole list of things I'd like to talk about. If I ever get motivated enough to post more content, I'll certainly cover more of those questions. But for now, etheric cords, and if any of this resonates with you, go ahead, be courageous, and tell us about it. All right? Sending you all much love and much light, and we'll speak again real soon.